Hey everybody, today I want to talk to you briefly about Andrew Johnson's impeachment. Andrew Johnson is going to be the first president in United States history to be impeached, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about why and why it's significant. So let's get to it. First of all, some historical context. It's important for you to remember that this is a time when the country is deeply divided. So Andrew Johnson is the successor to Abraham Lincoln. And Lincoln, if you go back to maybe some of the stuff Mr. McCarty was talking about, Lincoln had wanted a relatively painless and swift Reconstruction. The radical Republicans, those are the really progressive Republicans in Congress, wanted a tougher Reconstruction. They wanted it to be harder and more requirements for the South to rejoin the Union. Lincoln thought a swift reunion would be better. So this is context. Congress had passed an aggressive bill called the Wade-Davis bill, and Lincoln pocket vetoed that. But Lincoln then would be assassinated, and Congress did not trust his successor, Andrew Johnson. And they thought that Andrew Johnson was just going to acquiesce to their will and go with a more radical plan for Reconstruction, but he doesn't. And ultimately, he ends up favoring a more moderate Reconstruction plan, more like Lincoln's than the radical Republicans in Congress. So, remember, this is the context. Radical Republicans trying to implement a radical type of Reconstruction plan that's going to require the use of the military to enforce the new requirements upon the South. They also, in 1866, pick up a veto-proof majority of the House and Senate. So they have the 2/3 majority in both houses. So that's some of the context. So what happens? What is the impeachment for? Well, Congress knew that they would need the support of Edwin Stanton, who was also a radical Republican, and it just happened to be the Secretary of War, the Secretary of Defense. He had been the Secretary of Defense under Lincoln, and Johnson, it was feared, was going to fire Stanton, and Stanton was going to be replaced by a more moderate Secretary of Defense. So Congress had passed a law called the Tenure of Office Act, and basically that was a law to protect Stanton. And Johnson had vetoed it, but Congress had a veto-proof majority, so they passed it anyways. What this law said was that Johnson could not get rid of any of his cabinet members, Stanton included, without the advice and consent of the United States Senate. So just like a president has to get the advice and consent of the Senate to appoint cabinet members, the Tenure of Office Act said he has to do the same thing to get rid of them. And again, this was designed to protect Stanton. So what did Johnson do? Well, Johnson tried to get Stanton to resign. Stanton refused to resign. And so Johnson, when Congress is out of session, used a loophole in the Tenure of Office Act to suspend Stanton and to replace him with a more moderate Secretary of Defense, Secretary of War. All right, so basically, in Congress's mind, he has violated the Tenure of Office Act by getting rid of Stanton and appointing somebody new, neither of which did he get the advice and consent from the Senate. And that was deemed to be in violation of the Tenure of Office Act. So he's going to be impeached. And remember, impeachment is high crimes and misdemeanors. There's 11 articles of impeachment that ultimately the House will pass impeaching Johnson, making Johnson the first president to be impeached in United States history. All right, so he's ultimately not going to be removed from office. Remember, the impeachment and removal process are two separate steps. The House basically accuses the president of a crime, and the Senate adjudicates it. They decide whether he has committed it or not. So the Senate was one vote away, and about 10 Republicans decided not to impeach Johnson. They broke with their party and thought that impeachment was not a good idea. Why did some Republicans break from their party to acquit President Johnson rather than remove him from office and get a more favorable candidate? Well, one of them, a guy named Lyman Trumbull, explained. I'm just going to quote from Lyman Trumbull, from a senator from Illinois. He said, "Once set, the example of impeaching a president for what, when the excitement of the hour shall have subsided, will be regarded as insufficient causes, as several of those now alleged against the president were decided by the House of Representatives only a few months since, and no future president will be safe who happens to differ with the majority of the House and 2/3 of the Senate on any measure deemed by them important, particularly if of a political character. Blinded by partisan zeal, with such an example before them, they will not scruple to remove out of the way any obstacle to the accomplishment of their purposes, and what then becomes of the checks and balances of the Constitution, so carefully devised and so vital to its perpetuity, they are all gone." All right, so what is Trumbull saying? Essentially, Trumbull is saying, if we make impeachment a political process, if it is just that the president disagrees with the majority of the House and 2/3 of the Senate, then we're going to be in some serious trouble as a nation. And the president will not be allowed to disagree with Congress, and that is bad for our system of checks and balances. So since then, there have been 2 more presidents who have been impeached. The first, Bill Clinton, was only the 2nd president who had been impeached. And then in your lifetime, Donald Trump, who was impeached just in the recent past. So one was a Democrat impeached by a Republican House for what at the time Democrats considered to be political purposes. The other was a Republican impeached by a Democratic House by what at the time Republicans considered to be political reasons, right? And although the circumstances and charges of each impeachment have been significantly different, there have been leaders in both parties at both times who have essentially made the same argument that Lyman Trumbull did over 150 years ago. So what do you think? Under what circumstances should a president be impeached? Will political or partisan impeachments weaken America's system of checks and balances? Has it already? These are some questions to think about as you just kind of ponder the significance, the lasting significance of this first impeachment. All right, so I'm going to leave you there, and then we will talk more about radical Reconstruction and ultimately the election of 1876 and the end of Reconstruction that comes with the Compromise of 1877. All right, thanks for watching.